Welcome back. This is episode 8 of the Bridge podcast. I'm here with a really incredible person, a hero of mine. This is the founder of Bridge Lacrosse. From California, I have Miss Edie Lycke on this Zoom call. How are you, Edie?
Hi, David. Great to be with you, as always.
So this is fun. I appreciate you jumping on, and I know that we all have a little bit more free time, so this was a good opportunity to catch up. We put out this podcast, and some people have reached out about what kind of new topics or content, and a handful have said, let's go back in time a little bit. So I think this is a great opportunity for you and I just to catch up, but I'm also a little fuzzy sometimes on the history. So let's do this. Why don't you do kind of a quick bio and then maybe kind of roll into the genesis of this organization?
Okay, well, quick bio of me is I had a professional career in sales, mostly advertising sales, and I retired from the world of paid work into sort of volunteer work and community activism. And during that time, my daughter announced that she would love to play lacrosse. Her school did not have a lacrosse program. And so I helped start a lacrosse program at the Hockaday School, which this was back in 1998. And just more people started, lacrosse was really starting to pick up then. It's hard to believe now when it's so everywhere in the Dallas area, in Texas really, that there were very few teams back in 1998. But anyway, we started a program at Hockaday, and people kept coming to me wanting my help to start lacrosse teams. And so I did that, helped several schools get started. And then I started thinking, gosh, it would really be nice if some of those kids in South Dallas could have the fun of playing lacrosse, because I watched so many kids fall in love with the sport over and over again. You just put a stick in their hand and a ball in the stick, and they just have so much fun. So I had heard about a school in South Dallas called St. Philip's. And I went down to St. Philip's and talked to Terry Flowers, who was then and still is, I guess, the headmaster, whatever, I'm not sure what his exact title is. Mm-hmm. And, typical of Terry, he said, sure, let's try it. He didn't know anything about lacrosse. It was crazy in the beginning. We had to sort of tussle with the football coaches to get some field time, and we had a hard time finding coaches in the beginning. Right. First coach we had was a woman. She brought her boyfriend. The boyfriend began to take over.
What year is this, by the way? Sorry.
I think this is about maybe 2005, something okay. Like maybe before that, maybe even 2003. But anyway, the kids loved it. That was the bottom line. The kids loved it, as I had suspected they would, because so many other kids I'd watched just start out ended up loving it. So as soon as the kids start loving it, the parents, who were very, shall we say, suspicious is not the right word. They wondered who this middle-aged white woman was that was coming into their neighborhood, right? Getting their kids to play this sport. And we really had no agenda other than teaching the kids this sport. We were not a religious group. We were not a political group. We weren't trying to change anything. We were just trying to get kids to play lacrosse, and that it could really lead to some wonderful opportunities for them. But really, the ultimate motivation was just for them to have fun playing lacrosse. So should I go on, or do you?
Yeah, So I came in 2000, I graduated in 2008, came in that fall. So let's say fall 2008, where are you in terms of the programming? Because by then we also had the girls team, correct?
Exactly. So the first team that we had at St. Philip's was a 5th and 6th grade boys team. And I would have loved to have started a girls team there, but the girls were very engaged in cheerleading. Mm-hmm. And so I knew the headmistress at Irma Rangel, which is a DISD public school, magnet school. And I called her and said, we'd love to start a lacrosse program there. And she said, great. So we went into Irma Rangel, and again, nobody had ever heard of the sport. What was it about? Another, again, problems trying to get field time, trying to find coaches. That was a big problem in the beginning. I'm glad it's not a problem today. Coaches that were available at the time, we needed to practice. So we went through a lot of different coaches back then. But again, the sport is so fun.
Yep.
And the girls loved it. And they also loved the camaraderie that they built. I mean, girls are different than guys, as you know better than anybody, David. They did not win a game, I think, for 3 years. Not one single game.
Yeah. Never
Dampened their enthusiasm.
Right.
Not one bit. They just kept showing up, and it was, they had just as much fun learning to play and playing as the guys did. And that, oh gosh, that was a year after we started at St. Philip's. So I'm going to guess again about 2006, 2007, around there.
There was already a pretty good amount of programming going on, pretty sizable amount of kids and teams or engagement. So what happened exactly in 2008 where you reincorporated then? Because maybe that's where I'm also fuzzy on that.
What happened, we had this organization that I had started called Friends of North Texas Lacrosse. And because the objective of Friends of North Texas Lacrosse was to grow the sport in North Texas, and because Bridge was in effect growing the sport in North Texas, we were able to take the corporate charter for Friends of North Texas Lacrosse and make it into Bridge Lacrosse. I mean, it was just it was one of our board members who was an attorney was able to do that for us.
Okay. Because
we did not change the objective. So it was still a nonprofit under Texas law and met all the criteria.
I asked that really more, maybe less for this podcast and more for my own
it's a good
history lesson.
But I think, David, the 2003 date was when we started Friends of North Texas Lacrosse. And I think that was maybe 2 or 3 years, maybe even 4 before we made that transition into Bridge Lacrosse. I think Friends of North Texas Lacrosse started in 2003.
Okay.
And that would be where you could say Bridge Lacrosse started then, but that was really just the genesis of the organization that is today, Bridge Lacrosse.
Okay. And I have one more question just for my own personal history lessons. While all this is going on in South Dallas at St. Philip's and Irma Rangel, what was your connection to U.S. Lacrosse and their Bridge initiative?
Oh, thank you for asking that. Well, again, I'd have to go back and look at the year. There had been a cover story on Lacrosse magazine about an organization called Metro Lacrosse, which was what is the word we use now? Underserved?
We define it as urban-based youth development.
Okay, it was an urban-based lacrosse program outside of Boston. And I just thought that was wonderful what they were doing. And I went to the U.S. Lacrosse Convention that year and met Zach Lehman, who had started Metro Lacrosse, and talked to him about it. And he was very helpful, very encouraging, very supportive. Also, at that time, U.S. Lacrosse had determined that lacrosse was viewed by the public as a, white upper school, private school sport. And they wanted to broaden the base of the sport and to sort of change the perception of it. So U.S. Lacrosse became very supportive of organizations that were working to grow the sport in traditionally underserved areas for lacrosse. And they created a program, nationwide program called Bridge. And nobody knows this probably but me. It stands for Building Relationships to Initiate Diversity, Growth, and Enrichment.
That's right.
That was the acronym
I remember
that we created. The committee created too. And most of the groups never used that word bridge. It was the umbrella organization that US Lacrosse used. But I thought it's a perfect name.
Uh-huh.
So we're going to use it. So that's why we called it Bridge Lacrosse Dallas, to distinguish it if there were other bridge lacrosse programs in other cities.
Right. Okay. That's actually pretty accurate to my understanding, or my recap of the history. So yeah, I appreciate that. I'm always, sometimes I can kind of, and maybe it's because I've been here for so long, but sometimes, like I said, those origins can get kind of fuzzy.
Well, another thing, David, that's, I think out of all the organizations that were present when US Lacrosse had that forum, I think Metro Lacrosse and the one in Brooklyn, I can't remember what it's called, and Bridge Lacrosse in Dallas are the only ones that are still operating from the same people that were, or the same entities. There was one in Richmond and there was one in San Francisco. I can't remember all the other. I mean, there weren't a lot, but there were definitely others. And look, Bridge wouldn't still be going if it weren't for you. So yeah, I mean, it's just so happens so often that somebody, founds a group and then leadership changes and it just doesn't go.
Yeah, it's hard to maintain
enthusiasm or the leadership ability or whatever.
Yeah, it's definitely hard to maintain some of these organizations, and we've seen a few come and go, and then we're very supportive of new organizations that pop up. I don't know if you saw, and this is kind of, we may bounce around this timeline, but I don't know if you saw, we added a K-2 team, and that is, talk about just like memorable quotes.
Adorable.
Just, everything they say is gold. Everything they do is just a perfect moment in time. And unfortunately, we only had them for the half of the season, but that was the highlight. That has been the highlight of the last 6 months.
Well, when we first started, I think it was the first year at St. Philip's, there was a kid on the team named Joshua Draden.
Yeah.
If you remember Ed Draden.
I do.
Well, Joshua was a really good athlete, and his little brother, Jaden, used to come to practice with him. Yeah. And Jaden wanted to play lacrosse, and he insisted on dressing out. And he was probably about 3. And of course, we only had, mostly like high school size stuff. If you remember in the beginning, everything was donated. It was way too big, even for the 5th and 6th graders. And I wish I could find the picture of Jaden in all of that lacrosse gear, just kind of hanging on him. He's an adorable kid. It was just so funny. He would not be calmed until he was fully pads, helmet, everything.
Oh, I love it. We have a lot of those scenarios now. And it's funny you mentioned his name. We just recently did a Zoom call when we had some of the alumni come back. So Nakai, Jeremy, and Kevin came back to do a Zoom meeting. It's fun to, it was really fun to catch up with them, talk about
they had a lot of fun.
They did. That. It was just fun to talk with them. And you realize that these were players that we had at the 4th and 5th grade level. And now there's some of the biggest names in college lacrosse.
Well, I sent Caravani some photos of Nakai when we had Kyle Harrison for a couple of clinics, and Nakai is on the front row, and he's just like, you could just see, he's like, wow, this guy is just incredible. And of course, back then, I was just taking pictures of the kids, Nakai just happened to be in it because he knew he was going to be the standout. And then I remember when you were around for this, whenever Paxton, Nakai, and Jeremy were together, if they all were at a game, we were like, okay, we're golden.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
You know what else, David, when I listened to the podcast with Carla, what she was talking about, the reason she decided to major in, I think it was public policy or something at UNC was partly because of going to schools in other parts of the city, getting out of her hood, so to speak, and
Mm-hmm.
into a different hood. And then starting to say, why is it that my neighborhood looks like this and my school looks like this and their school looks like that? I just thought, wow, that's a benefit that we didn't, not directly set out to do. Like I
Yeah,
said, I hope there would be opportunities for kids, but yeah, to help them see there's a different world out there, and to help the rich white kids see there's a different world out there.
certainly.
But when she said that, I thought, wow, okay.
It's
there is stuff going on that we don't even know.
one thing that's been hard with this organization too, because a lot of people, we talk a lot about metrics and outcomes and ultimately what do we want the goal to be. And it's sort of hard to measure opportunity. There's no quantitative measurement necessarily that we can just grab onto.
Mhm.
And so to have those stories from Carla about this opportunity came to me and it sort of changed the trajectory or impacted the trajectory of my life, we really gravitate towards, because it's hard to measure exactly
Yeah,
what Bridge does in the long term.
it is. It's happening to kids right now, and you're not going to know it for several years.
Yeah.
It's
That's
happening right now.
yeah, it's hard to do some of this work without knowing or seeing the outcomes, if ever down the road.
Hmm. And yeah, it is. I mean, you don't get immediate feedback, but that conversation with Carla should make you feel really, really, really good.
I am curious, when I applied for the job,
Hmm.
what was the hiring process like? Part of me is like, I think they just gave me this job. I don't know what I'm doing. What was it about the interview? Because I was nervous. I had a resume that did not remotely, look like I could run an organization. I'm just curious.
Are you talking when you took over?
Yeah, when I took over.
When I left, you mean?
Correct.
I think, yeah, you were quite young. How old were you then?
I think I was 27, 26,
Yeah,
26,
you were very
27.
young, but you were so enthusiastic. I mean, you clearly loved what you were doing so much. And Krista was very supportive of your doing it. And that was huge, because if you don't have a supportive spouse and you're making not much money at all,
Yeah.
and your spouse every night is saying, why don't you get a real job? You're not going to last very long.
Sometimes those conversations still carry it into today. I'm just kidding.
But yeah, I mean, you had everything you had done up to that point. You had come through. You'd been dependable. You were true to your word. You were young and you could really relate to the kids. That was important too. But that job was, as you learned, less about the kids and becomes more administrative. That's the problem with.
I appreciate that, because I do look back and think, why would someone give me the keys to this thing? Why would someone let me run this organization with no experience, remotely any experience to run a nonprofit?
Well, it wasn't just me, believe me. It wasn't just me. It was a pretty universal feeling among the board.
Building this organization and watching the way you navigated everything between the fundraising, the relationships, being present with the kids,
That was
the
the best part.
snacks. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. You did so much, and I saw you hit every element of what it takes to run this organization. And that's something that never leaves my mind, whether it's writing a grant, meeting a foundation, or, hey, I've just got to make drop-offs, cleats to kids, at their house.
Do you
is
all
what made this
still have to
organization
do
successful.
the snacks?
We don't, and that's because the evolution of Bridge has, moved us away from that.
That was hard.
I remember you in cricket cutting up orange slices in the St. Philip's cafeteria, and
or going to Costco and buying those taquitos. They love those taquitos.
Right. Yeah, we've evolved away from the schools in a way that was
Right.
I had talked to.
Good.
Yeah, I was talking to Rocky, who's the New Horizons person in the previous podcast. It was something that I wasn't sure was the right thing to do. I wasn't sure if it was going to go well. I fully expected kids to be like, I'm out, and not join the season. I wanted to ask you then, as you're getting going and this is getting wheels, what was the ultimate vision for the organization? What was funders ask this, if you had $1 billion for Bridge, did you have that kind of vision at any point?
No, I didn't have a bold vision like it would be a, $1 million operation. Honestly, I've never said this to anybody. This was always the thought in my mind that our budget was never so big, and I'm talking about the first couple of years, that if everything had gone to hell in a handbasket, I could have covered it personally. I mean,
Right.
it was like $5,000 or $6,000.
Right.
I mean, we were like, talk about shoestring.
Yeah.
But that allowed me the freedom to just plow ahead, knowing that, if I had to, I could purchase the equipment, or, I could be the backstop, if you will,
Mhm.
financially. But no, it never. I wasn't trying to see if I could get lacrosse in, 25 schools or anything like that. It was let's just start and see what happens. And then I was really strong that if we had a boys team, we had to have a girls team.
Mhm.
So then it became 2 schools, and then really it was almost demand from the kids. I mean, other kids were starting to hear about it and wanted to play, and
Yeah.
it was a little tussle between. I remember St. Anthony's was a school that we were back and forth with for a long time about, would we start a program there? And yes, they wanted it, but then, the football coach or some other coach or the baseball coach or somebody, the track
Yeah.
coach, was not in favor of it. So it would be like tabled for that year.
Right.
I think Barack Obama, we were able to get started because it was a brand new school. They didn't have anything. So
Mhm.
we were able to sort of get in at the very beginning. But no, I can't say, David, I had any grand idea that
And
way.
that's
It was
okay.
just, no, it was just wanting kids to, in those neighborhoods, to have the fun of playing lacrosse and the opportunities that it could possibly open up for them.
And that mentality still very much exists in Bridge, is that we're going to meet the needs of kids, and we're going to be very intentional with our movement and our growth. But because everything's become more structured and that things are more efficient, it has lended some extra time to say, what is the big, bold vision for this
Mhm.
organization? And that's kind of fun to talk about. It's fun to talk about with our kids, especially. The high school girls podcast we did a couple weeks ago, they talk about, when they get out of college and when they get a great job, they want to come back and donate to Bridge, and they
Oh,
want to
that's
donate this
wonderful.
big field, and they want to paint it blue. And those are really fun conversations. And
So tell me, what year was it when you took over Bridge, when you became the executive
it
director?
was October, November of 2011.
Okay.
And I had been with the organization since that fall 2008. And then you were nice enough to invite me to the board. And I was coaching with Coach Jack at St. Philip's. And then,
Okay.
jumped on in November of 11.
So tell me what your first year was like.
It was very much drinking from a fire hose. And a lot of it was just being so overwhelmed with building personal relationships with people that I didn't have a lot of common ground with. And so we had, really high level donors and people of influence. And I'm 27. I played club lacrosse, so I don't really speak the lacrosse language, like an East Coast lacrosse language necessarily. And a lot of it too was trying to maintain what you had built, but also is there a way we can adjust this, or do we need to evolve this aspect of programming or this relationship or whatever? But yeah, the first couple of years were just pure chaos. And a lot of it was just because
And,
the
and
steep learning curve.
how did you decide, how did you determine that the programming needed to be shifted, maybe away from the, just by school into more club, if you would call it that?
Yeah, that's a good question. It came from a lot of different variables over time. And so the first one was seeing, like I mentioned earlier, Metro Lacrosse, and seeing kind of a unified brand. That
Right.
all the kids wear Metro Lacrosse, the Metro Lacrosse Bulldogs, the Metro Lacrosse, insert whatever mascot name. And everything for us was kind of behind the school. So people
Right.
knew Bridge, but they knew St. Philip's Lacrosse a little bit
Right.
more so. And they kind of weren't sure where Bridge fit into the picture. And so there was
Got it. Okay.
some
Good.
branding gaps that I saw. Biggest thing was just culture, or was between the kids. Like the programs were siloed for the teams. And I remember we finally did a picnic where all the teams got together.
Uh-huh.
instead of doing the individual banquets, because we used to do like a school banquet essentially.
Right.
And so because we wanted to bring everyone together, we did a big end of season picnic and just had all the programs at once. And I remember a mother from Irma came over and said, "Who are those older boys over there?" And she had no idea that we ran a boys team at Brockman. They were middle school boys.
Uh-huh.
That was another one of those moments or variables where I was like, okay, we're running siloed programs here, and we're missing out on an opportunity to be sort of this unified brand. But that was
Yeah,
still,
that was good observation.
but we were still a couple years away from officially making that decision to go to a unified brand. I mean, this had really been a 5-6 year process.
Mm-hmm.
But it was always something in the back of my mind that we needed to do. So it was a lot of different things. And then you had, when we really made the final decision, which was to move officially away from the schools, we just kept running into problems with the venues, and DISD can be difficult sometimes. And the budget wasn't,
Right.
we were really not able to come up with the money for the rentals and things like that. And so we finally reached out to Parks and Rec and said, we want a home, and are you willing to help us out and find something? And they were incredible. And Dallas Parks and Rec has been incredibly generous in accommodating to our needs and helping us build this sort of central unit within our organization, or program of our organization.
So do you have a dedicated field now for the bridge programs?
We do, yes. It's about 10-15 minutes south of St. Phillips, just down 45. It's incredibly beautiful. It kind of nestles into the Trinity Forest. The river is not too far away. It's a pretty quiet neighborhood. It's next to an elementary school where we actually pull kids from. Some of the neighborhood kids, walk over. It's quiet. The only challenge that we have is that we're running out of space, essentially. We have 12 teams practicing on one field. And so you can imagine just the lack of space is a little daunting. We do use the outfield of the baseball field, which that's nice. The tennis courts we were using, and then it's a rec center. So, we can use the rec center, like the conference room or gym, if it's available. So we have a home, and it's wonderful and we love it. But we're also realizing too, a second full field would be nice. A third full field would be nice.
Sure. So tell me about one of the difficulties we had in the beginning, really big difficulty, was finding coaches. Tell me about your experience with coaches, because as I understand now, you have lots of coaches. That's not a problem anymore.
It's not. And it's funny because, when people talk about, we need coaches, we're hurting for coaches, I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. They come to me and it's been great. And that hasn't been the entire time I've been with the organization, but it has evolved over time where our name is a little bit more present. Our network is a little bit stronger and deeper. And so it becomes, hey, I heard about your organization through a friend or a colleague. I found you on just a Google search, right? I type in lacrosse and that's that's how I found you all too, was just a quick Google search. Search. So right now, the other thing I want to add to that. So in addition to just having more presence in the lacrosse community and the philanthropic community and just a good SEO, we have alumni, where we've been around long enough to where those who came through a program early on are now out of high school, out of college, and now part of our coaching staff. And so this year I had 27 coaches.
Wow.
Yeah. 27 coaches on 12 teams. And of the 27 coaches, I think I have at least 5 or 6.
That's fabulous.
And mostly on the girls' side. That is wonderful. But yeah, the alumni have been a big part of the bolstering and coaches. And, we were even trying to get Carla to coach this last spring. Obviously she is busy as a trustee.
other things to do.
She had other things on her to-do list for sure. But so the alumni have been a part of that growth in our coaching staff. And again, we have great coaches who just say, I want to be a part of this organization because, this is something different and something special. And, they might be more mission oriented and they don't really care about making an extra dollar coaching lacrosse. Like they want to be some part of something, maybe a little bit bigger than what they had planned. And so we get a lot of those coaches. And so our retention's really high for coaches too, which has been a big plus. We have a couple parents who coach, and then we also have coaches who have never held a lacrosse stick before. And
really?
I have a few coaches who are like, I like sports and I like kids. I like what you're doing with this community and I want to be a part of it. But FYI, I have no experience in lacrosse. And some of those guys turn out to be our best coaches.
So it sounds like you're having a lot of fun still.
It's been a great ride. And, now that we're moving more towards, again, the lacrosse programming has become year round and pretty efficient. It has lended us more time to work with kids, and help address other challenges and needs. So we're trying to do more on the education side. We're trying to be more of a resource for the high school kids in terms of walking them through college admissions, through some scholarships.
Tell me about when you started really branding Bridge as a family, and also you started using the word student athlete. That became like you're leading with the education part, the athletics, the lacrosse part of it being, I guess, sort of secondary. Is that accurate?
Yeah. And I would say a lot of that came from Coach Jack. Jack was great at always emphasizing the student athlete, that you're students first, athletes second. And that was just little things that he would say on the field that stuck with me. So much of what I know about coaching and what I've learned about coaching came from Coach Jack. And
well, you couldn't have had a better teacher.
A lot of those sayings, a lot of the verbiage came from him, and student athlete just worked really well. And then in terms of I think your first part of your question was the family aspect. That was just, honestly, Edie, that was just because I needed a hashtag for our social media. Mm-hmm. But it was part of that unifying branding of all the organization, or all the programs in the organization. Education stuff has been really interesting. And when we started to become more, like I said earlier, efficient in our programming, when we weren't worried about recruiting all the time and kids had equipment and things were just kind of running like maybe a more traditional lacrosse program, it bought us more time to meet and talk with these kids. We would start to have more time to do events off the field, like dinner with the team. And then when you're meeting these kids off the field, you get a chance to listen and learn more about home life, academic, maybe some of their challenges, things like that. And so from those conversations with parents too, and student athletes alike, you start to figure out, maybe we can be a part of helping address this challenge or this problem. And initially it just came up simply from, Coach, you guys talk a lot about this lacrosse program at Duke or Stanford. I don't know a lot about the schools. Can you tell me more? And then it just becomes a one-on-one conversation about, it's a good school, and, they got a great lacrosse team, and, is it a school you're interested in? And then it just snowballs into, they learn more about the school, they apply, nothing to do with lacrosse, but just this admissions curiosity. And we've turned it into some structured programming. It's still a moving target for us. We're obviously not an education nonprofit, but, we're trying to be a resource, and it's been a lot of fun, and, we're starting to find some success.
David, I remember, I couldn't tell you what year it was, but Sandy Boyce was on the board, and Sandy has all these contacts in lacrosse because of that big tournament his dad runs in Annapolis. He got a boatload of shorts for us, and they were just, I don't know whether you call them overages or, maybe they weren't perfect, whatever, anyway. And they all had names of schools on them. Right. Colleges on them. And so these kids are picking up these shorts, by which ones fit. But all of a sudden they're learning about Rutgers, or they're learning about Loyola, or they're learning about, Duke or Ohio State or whatever that maybe they had never thought about. And it did something. I'm not saying they decided at that moment they were going to go to Rutgers, but it was like, okay, these schools have lacrosse. These are places I could play lacrosse. Just a little connection.
It's a great gateway.
Interesting to see.
And lacrosse has been the tool, right? And you always said this, that lacrosse is the vehicle and the tool for something more, whether it's character, whether it's career or education. But that's how we've always framed it. And we're to the point now where we have more doors for these kids to look at through sports. We had a girl who went to a camp in Delaware, and there was a coach there at that camp that pointed her to what's called, are you familiar with Bridge?
Oh, no, I'm not.
It's an organization that offers scholarships for first-gen kids, and they match them with really great schools. I have heard that, yes. So Jackie, who was at this camp in Delaware that we sent her to, met up with this coach, lacrosse coach, and that coach was like, I really think you should apply for the Bridge scholarship. And she did. She got a full ride to Notre Dame, and she'll graduate in a year or two. And so there's all these little tiny connections, these little tiny doors that open up that we're really starting. One, we have more and more of over time, but they're also incredibly influential. So where Bridge going now? I mean, obviously it's on pause a little bit because of the
pandemic, but where do you see Bridge going in the future?
It's
What
a
are
really
your
great,
dreams?
it's a really great question. So, there's always a balance between scale and depth. And we've been scaling quite a bit for years. In 2019, we worked with almost 800 kids, almost 20,000 hours of cumulative programming, of individual programming, K through 12 this year, a full-on summer camp, our own summer league. I mean, it's nonstop. And so this was going to be the year that we were just going to maintain. We have K through 12, excuse me. We have these
Right.
programs. Let's add some depth to them, and
Mhm.
more hours of programming, more robust programming or higher quality program for the things that we already do. So the camp or spring training or whatever it may be, put more training and emphasis into our coaches. That's still kind of the goal. Obviously, COVID moves that a little bit
Right.
for us, but
Upended.
ultimately, yeah, exactly. But ultimately, 2020 was about adding that depth and adding a little bit more quality, or talking more about quality within the programming.
Mhm.
From there, though, we've talked with, even other neighborhoods. We centralized, like I said, 3 years ago, but now maybe is there a move to decentralize? And maybe we're Bridge Lacrosse in this neighborhood specifically with a K through 12 team, and then this neighborhood specifically with K through 12. Maybe we add a little bit more geography to it. We've added a select team, so we wanted to make that more robust. So yeah, 2020 was really about depth and quality.
It's just so fun to see the evolution and to see that you have so many coaches now, and they obviously have their reasons for being drawn to it.
Absolutely.
Which is so fun to think about.
Mm-hmm.
They're not getting paid, are they?
No, not at all. I tell a lot of people this, that I would put my coaching staff up against any other program's staff any day of the week in terms of just the level of expertise that they have, how much they care about the kids, and really, really do work very hard to make sure our kids have a great experience. Yeah, there's some of the best coaches out there, and we have maybe somewhat of a propensity for getting coaches that could go elsewhere. And great story I have, we had 2 sisters come to Bridge. They lived in Frisco. They reached out and said, we want to coach with Bridge. We've heard about your organization and want to get involved. And, and still to this day, female coaches are incredibly hard to find. And as soon as one shows up in Dallas, like she's usually snatched up pretty quickly within a program.
Right.
So these two sisters reached out and said, we want to get involved in your program. I met up in Frisco, and I was pretty open with them. I was like, listen, you all could coach for any other program significantly closer to where you all live than come and coach and make money versus coming to coach for us. And they were both like, no, we want to coach with your organization. We'll make the drive work. We don't care about the pay.
Oh my God. That's amazing.
And I was like, and yeah, and I want to be very open with them and say, listen, like, you could stay in Frisco and make a lot of money and coach here. But they were like, no, we want to be a part of what this organization is about. And,
well, that says a lot. That says a lot for you, David.
Well, and I think, I appreciate that. It says a lot about the two of them and how much they were willing to sacrifice for, for our mission and for our kids.
It does say a lot about them. But it says, again, coaches, the word would be out if you were if you were a difficult person to work with, or it's a great program that you have sustained and grown, and are continuing to grow it. So it's just going to keep growing indefinitely. Is that?
That's the plan, right? We want to continue to do great things for kids and meet their challenges and needs. And yeah.
It's so fun to hear about in more detail. I've gotten little bits and pieces from you, but it's so much fun to hear in more detail about what's happening today. And really, you've just done such a great job.
I appreciate that.
With continuing a program that I started that was quite small and now has grown hugely. And it gives me street cred when, I say, people say, that I started Bridge Lacrosse. Well, if it was one of those like Richmond that went away after a year, it wouldn't mean anything. But you've kept it going and grown it and sustained it and expanded it, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, it's been really fun. Again, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate your time, and I hope you enjoy.
I'm so happy to do it.